What widely accepted fact do you know is wrong? Goldfishes really do not have a memory span of 5 seconds. They actually remember things for months, recognize their owners, and are able to distinguish them from other people. I had 2 goldfish when I was younger. Their names were Paula and Mr. Fishy. When Mr. Fishy died, Paula spent the next couple of days frantically swimming around the tank trying to find him. It was heartbreaking to watch. AWW, that hurts. I love goldfish. They are adorable. NASA spent $$ inventing a pen that worked in space and the Russians used pencils. Total bollocks. The Fisher Pen Company was independent and developed its space pen with zero investment from NASA. American astronauts began using mechanical pencils in space. Tiny fragments of graphite and graphite dust floating around the spacecraft was not ideal because graphite is conductive. It's also combustible, so everyone was keen to find an alternative. Fisher patented its first zero-gravity pen in 1965, and in 1967 NASA began using it. By 1969 Russia were also buying them for their space missions. Reportedly both NASA and the Soviet Space Company received the same discount for their bulk purchases. Thank you. Thus one is a perfect example of misunderstanding something complicated, the US federal procurement system, and drawing the exact wrong conclusion because of it. The Russians were smarter because they just used a pencil. A similar myth is that the dude would deliberately spend $600 on a single hammer. Rather, this was an accounting artifact due to contractors claiming a flat overhead price on a spare parts buy, split up evenly amongst all the spare parts. The cheap parts look ridiculously overpriced, but the expensive stuff, like engines, look ridiculously cheap. And then we ignore the cheap price on engines and focus only on the expensive hammers. Not only that, NASA is working with some really specific alloys and materials, things that a normal cheap hammer might damage or contaminate with rust or something. Additionally, a hammer would need to be developed that an astronaut is able to hold with his bulky spacesuit gloves and perhaps some kind of tether to prevent it from departing wistfully into space. Hiring someone who is an expert on what sort of hammers work best on beryllium would definitely raise the cost of the hammer. The point is, it's not just about picking any random hammer off the shelf, it's a whole process to evaluate different types of hammers, the jobs the hammer needs to do, and finding the expertise to decide which hammer is worth the government's money. Which is better, NASA buying one hammer or NASA replacing a hammer every 6 months because they hired a shoddy contractor? The extra layers of bureaucracy, analysis, quality control, testing, all of this adds to the cost. It's easy to say a lol $600 hammer, but it's much harder to say this hammer was developed just for this job. It does it perfectly, and they may never need to buy another hammer again. Hell, if they made a $600 super hammer available to the public, I'd buy the hell out of it. We are here for you during these unprecedented times. I work in higher education. They have been saying this throughout the pandemic. They announced yesterday that staff will not receive their annual raise or bonus. They have also furloughed staff. Faculty, which includes administration, will receive those raises and bonus, and none have been furloughed. Even in the email, where they told us we would not receive the raise/bonus, it was this crap: we are here for you, we appreciate you, blah, blah, blah. We've learned to savor the moments that were always there. Now go buy Coca-Cola. That cracking your knuckles too often will cause arthritis. This thread reads like a spotter's guide to stuff my mum told me when I was young. My mum still says such stuff by reading it off of WhatsApp forwards. That you have to wait 24 hours to report someone missing in the USA. There is no law about waiting. You don't have to push to make the police cooperate and list the person missing immediately when you suspect something isn't right. Don't lose precious time. It's extremely important if the person truly is missing. I don't know how that myth came to be. It's way too dangerous. Makes for compelling TV. We are experiencing a temporary high volume of phone calls. Your call is important to us. Listen, please listen carefully, as our options have recently changed. The first is to make people more likely to wait happily. Second is to try and get them to pay attention to the options, which haven't been changed in 20 years. As someone who works in a position taking calls all day, both of these tend to, at least with us, be 100% honest. People have an idea that calling a business support will result in a phone ringing at a center with like 100 plus people. The queue was only 4. Why did it take an hour to get to me? In reality, some businesses have hardcore understaffed support. As in, the business I work for has around 10,000 plus customers and a support staff of 4. In regards to the options thing, you would be surprised at how little people seem to care about where they go, and then they get mad when their randomly selected number can't assist them. What do you mean you can't fix my crap? I called business, right? Well, sir, this is billing, and your issue is tech related. If you would like me to help with billing, we can do that. However, I cannot fix your equipment. This is bullcrap. Every day. All day. That you swallow 8 spiders a year in your sleep. The origins of that myth is so weird. It made its way around message boards in the 90s and possibly earlier. Then at some point, the Snopes Usenet board, pre-website, claimed that the myth was invented by a tech journalist who wanted to illustrate how lies spread on the internet. Except that Snopes lead, the journalist, never existed. So now there's a second layer to the myth, that being the myth of who invented it and why. Just let me know. We only use 10% of our brain. So, what, like 12%? Saying we use 10% of our brain is like saying we only use 1/3 of our traffic lights. People didn't think the earth was flat 500 years ago. It was theorized to be round in the 5th century BC. The Americas were just not known yet, except to Indigenous Americans, and it was believed that there was a vast ocean between Europe and Asia. People believed Columbus' voyage would fail, because he would exhaust his food and supplies before crossing it. The Chinese also knew the earth was round earlier than that, and even sent expeditions to map it, but they mostly got lost, did pirate stuff, or sank during storms. Way better boats than Columbus had though. Didn't some ancient Greek figure out the earth was round because he had some friends measure shadows of the same object and same time in Egypt and Greece? Cutting your hair makes it grow faster, or shaving makes it thicker. It is actually true to a certain extent. The first batch of hair that grows sort of tapers off at the top. So when you shave, and the hair regrows, it now only regrows with the thicker end, giving the illusion of increased volume. There are some idiots out there who believe shaving will give them hair where it doesn't grow. If you have a cold, you should get lots of vitamin C. This is completely down to one scientist called Linus Pauling, who had a theory that massive doses of vitamin C would cure colds. Subsequent studies have shown he was wrong, and any benefits are minimal at best. Yet I still get everyone telling me to drink orange juice whenever I get a sniffle. My dad has smoked for 45 years and still thinks he's fine because he drinks a glass of orange juice every day. My stepdad used to say he could eat 1 kilograms of chocolate and eat an orange and the orange would counteract the effects of the chocolate. He is a diabetic now. Left and right brained people who are either more artistic or more numbers based. Just as inaccurate as the parts of your tongue that taste different things, yet people still say it. I really wish people wouldn't limit their own potential like that. Sorry, I just don't do math. I'm more of a creative type. Or oh, I think too logically for art. Like, what? Look at Leonardo da Vinci. The dude invented a flying machine and painted the Mona Lisa at the same time. Creativity and logic are not mutually exclusive. The not a math person trope is so self-defeating. Yes, people have different skill levels, but you can manage algebra, Keith. The lawsuit over McDonald's coffee burn wasn't some ridiculous old lady looking to cheat the system and get money. She was legit severely burned and basically got very little money out of it. McDonald's purposely made the woman look like she was suing them for something ridiculous to cover their butts. Poor lady just wanted her medical bills covered. If I remember correctly, it wasn't even her that wanted to sue, it was her son or grandson that pushed her relentlessly to sue, and all she wanted was to get the bills covered. 3rd-degree burns to the inside of her legs and genitalia. It's actually a super fricked up story to read. That 2 blue-eyed people can't have a brown-eyed kid. They can, but it comes down to recessive blue gene. Too complicated to go into it. But seeing the charts that are like 1 + 1 brown will make a 50/50 chance of blue or brown eye baby. two blues will only make a blue or a green, etc. It ain't true. There are a bunch of different genes that control eye color. The myth that two blue-eyed people can't have dark-eyed children comes from the oversimplified biology lessons, where they teach eye color is controlled by one allele. If that were true, and dark is dominant, then yeah, it wouldn't be possible, but the genetics are more complicated than that, and can't be easily represented in the classic Punnett square plus pedigree. That you have to buy new razor blades every week or two. Razors don't dull because use, they dull because they rust. If you thoroughly dry them, or oil them, they can last for almost a year and still work just fine. This is coming from a bald guy who shaves his head every other day. Drywall and carpenter here. They absolutely do dull because of use, they just may not dull because of that level of use before they dull because of rusting. To your point though, when you buy utility blades by the pack, they always come oiled to help preserve their edge. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost is not about how the road less traveled is better. It's about how you cannot know how life would have turned out if you had made different choices, so you have to convince yourself that your choice made the difference. He looks down both paths, and while one looked slightly less worn, they were really equal with no tracks on either. But he knew he would never be back to make that same choice again. So he imagines that in the future he will say with a sigh that taking the one less traveled made all the difference. He's just making peace with a choice he cannot change. ADHD is not an overdiagnosed myth to control energetic kids. There's an incredibly common version called inattentive type, which goes massively underdiagnosed because the people who have it aren't a disruption to the classroom, just themselves. Were you ever so smart, but you'd forget your own head if it wasn't on your shoulders? Do you get so into projects that you forget to eat for hours? Is it impossible for you to correctly estimate how long anything takes? Do you go through very intense phases of being super into a craft/game/hobby, then forget it exists? Do you start way more projects than you could ever finish? Do you frequently lose or forget things that you swear to God were just there? Did you skate by in school on raw intelligence, but never learn to study? Congrats. If most of those feel familiar, you might have an attentive type ADHD. It's especially likely if you're a woman and or always got good grades in school. Because again, you're not disrupting the classroom and you're clearly capable in some way, so the disorganization, tardiness, mistakes, etc. are drilled into you as being a moral failing. Hoping at least one person who sees this recognizes, wait, that's me, and gets some help. I figured it out on my own at 20 from reading a blog post and I want to pass it on. If you touch a baby animal, its mother won't come back for it. Objectively not true in nearly every case. Similarly, people think all reptiles are bad parents who just drop their eggs and leave. Nope. Lots of the time, yes. But not all. Certainly not crocodilians. We are also not descended from chimps or gorillas or other living great apes. Instead, we share a common ancestor. Or, to put it another way, we are distant cousins to the other extant great apes, not great-great-great-X 5000 grandkids. In Columbus era, it was common knowledge the world was round. Claiming he didn't know, and his expedition didn't know is stupid. Especially given how many centuries before then we knew the earth was round. You are not really just made up of, well, you. There are more non-human cells in your body than human cells. In reality, about 40 to 45% of cells are really human and the others are like your gut flora or colonies of other cells. People with mental illness are not, in fact, more likely to be violent than the rest of the population. They're actually slightly less so, but much more likely to be the victims. Despite what you think, the majority of theft isn't treated as illegal. See, wage theft, where your company steals from you, is so common it adds up to being more than other forms of theft/robbery combined in the United States per year. People also believe you get over chickenpox and your body eradicates it, except in reality it never really goes away and can cause things like shingles decades later. The world is full of minor misinformation.